Avant-garde music is music that is considered to be at the forefront of innovation in its field, with the term avant-garde implying a critique of existing aesthetic conventions, rejection of the status quo in favor of unique or original elements, and the idea of deliberately challenging or alienating audiences. Avant-garde music may be distinguished from experimental music by the way it adopts an extreme position within a certain tradition, whereas experimental music lies outside tradition. Experimental music is a general label for any music or music genre that pushes existing boundaries and genre definitions. Experimental compositional practice is defined broadly by exploratory sensibilities radically opposed to, and questioning of, institutionalized compositional, performing, and aesthetic conventions in music. Elements of experimental music include indeterminacy, in which the composer introduces the elements of chance or unpredictability with regard to either the composition or its performance. Artists may approach a hybrid of disparate styles or incorporate unorthodox and unique elements.
Please excuse any mispronunciations by TTS. The English TTS has trouble with non-English words. But, if you watch Zentraya, you should be fine. As a result of YouTube's rules pertaining to links in descriptions, I will be adding site details to the video. Drone music, drone-based music, or simply drone, is a minimalist genre of music that emphasizes the use of sustained sounds, notes, or tone clusters called drones. It is typically characterized by lengthy compositions featuring relatively slight harmonic variations. Lamonti Young, one of its 1960s originators, defined it in 2000 as the sustained tone branch of minimalism. Music containing drones can be found in many regional traditions across Asia, Australia, and Europe, but the genre label is generally reserved for music originating with the Western classical tradition. Elements of drone music have been incorporated in diverse genres such as rock, ambient, and electronic music. Music that contains drones and is rhythmically still or very slow, called drone music, can be found in many parts of the world, including bagpipe traditions, among them Scottish pibroch piping, didgeridoo music in Australia, South Indian classical Carnatic music, and Hindustani classical music, both of which are accompanied almost invariably by the tanpura, a plucked, four-string instrument that is only capable of playing a drone. The sustained tones found in the Japanese gagaku classical tradition, possibly in pre-polyphonic organum vocal music of late medieval Europe, and the Byzantine chanson, or drone singing, attested after the 15th century. Repetition of tones, supposed to be in imitation of bagpipes, is found in a wide variety of genres and musical forms. The modern genre, also called drone music, called dronology by some books, labels and stores, to differentiate it from ethnic drone-based music, is often applied to artists who have allied themselves closely with underground music and the post-rock or experimental music genres. Drone music forms a part of the movement referred to as minimal music. Pitchfork Media and Allmusic journalist Mark Richardson defined it thus: the vanishing point music created by drone elders Phil Niblock and, especially, Lamonti Young is what happens when a fixation on held tones reaches a tipping point. Timbre is reduced to either a single clear instrument or a sine wave, silence disappears completely, and the bass-level interaction between small clusters of pure tone becomes the music's content. This kind of work takes what typically helps us to distinguish music from sound, discards nearly all of it, and then starts over again from scratch. Composer Lamonti Young is an important figure in drone music. He described himself as fascinated from a young age by droning sounds, such as the sound of the wind blowing, the 60 cycle per second drone of step-down transformers on telephone poles, the tanpura drone and the ALAP of Indian classical music, certain static aspects of serialism, as in the Webern slow movement of the Symphony Opus 21, and Japanese gagaku, which has sustained tones in it in the instruments such as the sho. Young started writing music incorporating sustained tones in 1957 with the middle section of For Brass, then in 1958 what he describes as the first work in the history of music that is completely composed of long sustained tones and silences with trio for strings, before exploring this drone music within the Theatre of Eternal Music that he founded in 1962. The Theatre of Eternal Music is a multimedia performance group who, in its 1960s to 1970s heyday included at various times Lamonti Young, Marian Zazzila, Tony Conrad, AngusMacLise, Terry Jennings, John Cale, BillyName, John Hassel, AlexDea, and others, each from various backgrounds, classical composition and performance, painting, mathematics, poetry, jazz, etc. Operating from the world of lofts and galleries in New York in the mid-60s to the mid-70s in particular, and tied to the aesthetics of Fluxus and the post-John Cage continuum. The group gave performances on the east coast of the United States as well as in Western Europe. These performances comprised long periods of sensory inundation with combinations of harmonic relationships, which moved slowly from one to the next by means of laws laid out by Young regarding allowable sequences and simultaneities, perhaps in imitation of Hindustani classical music which he, Zazzila and the others either studied or at least admired. The group released nothing during their lifetime, although Young and Zazzila issued a collaborative LP in 1969, and in 1970 Young contributed one side of a flexi disc accompanying an issue of Aspenmagazine. The concerts themselves were influential on their own upon the art world, including Karlheinz Stockhausen, whose Stimmung bears their influence most strikingly, and the drone-based minimalist works of dozens of other composers, many of whom made parallel innovations, including young classmate Pauline Oliveras, or ElianeRadigue, CharlemagnePalestine, Yoshi Wada, Phil Niblock and many others. In 2000, Lamonti Young wrote, "About the style of music that I originated, I believe that the sustained tone branch of minimalism, also known as drone music, is a fertile area for exploration." In the mid-1960s, the Beatles began employing Indian-influenced drone elements in psychedelic rock tracks such as Tomorrow Never Knows. During this period, Theatre of Eternal Music member John Cale extended drone techniques to his next band, The Velvet Underground, along with songwriter Lou Reed. The Velvet Underground's first EP release in 1966, entitled Loop, was an experimental drone piece created by member Cale. The band's first album The Velvet Underground and Nico, laid the foundation for drone music as a rock music genre in close proximity to the Art World project of the Theatre of Eternal Music. Following his departure from the Velvet Underground, John Cale went on to produce Stooges' 1969 debut album, with the final mix including his viola drone on the track, We Will Fall. That same year Cale also performed viola on Nico's The Marble Index, on the track, Frozen Warnings. Later, Lou Reed issued in 1975 a double LP of multi-tracked electric guitar feedback entitled Metal Machine Music, which listed drone cognizance and harmonic possibilities vis-a-vis Lamont Young's Dream Music among its specifications. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, German rock musicians such as Can, New, Kraftwerk, Cluster, and Faust drew from 1960s rock groups that experimented with duration and repetition, for example The Velvet Underground, Pink Floyd, and CaptainBeefheart at his most kologic, and from composers such as Karlheinz Stockhausen, and Lamonti Young. These krautrock groups influenced art rock contemporaries in their own day and punk rock and post-punk players subsequently. Tony Conrad, of the Theatre of Eternal Music, notably made a collaborative LP with Faust which included nothing but two sides of complex violin drones accompanied by a single note on bass guitar and some percussion. Single-note bass lines also featured on Can's track, Mother Sky, and the entirety of DieKrupps' first album. Dronemetal was first established by Earth, a group from Olympia, Washington, formed in 1989 by minimalist musician DylanCarlson. Earth took inspiration from the sludge metal of Melvins and the minimalist music of Young, Riley, and Conrad. Stephen O'Malley's group Sun O, initially formed as a tribute to Earth, is most responsible for the contemporary prominence of the drone metal style. Boris, from Tokyo, also developed a style of drone metal, parallel with the Seattle groups, as did Corrupted, from Osaka. In 1990, British band Spacemen 3 recorded a live 45-minute drone album entitled Dream Weapon, an evening of contemporary sitar music, with liner notes by Lamonti Young. Across North America and Europe, some musicians sought to reconcile Asian classicalism, austere minimalism, and folk music's consonant aspects in the service of spirituality. Among them was Theatre of Eternal Music alumnus Terry Riley, with his 1964 in C. Along with Lamonti Young and Zazila, Riley had become a disciple of the Hindustani classical singer Pandit Pran Nath. In parallel, then krautrock band Tangerine Dream and its recently departed member Klaus Schulze moved toward a more contemplative and consonant harmonic music, each releasing their own Dronemusic album on the label or in August 1972, Zeit and Irrlicht, respectively. Throughout the 1970s, IRV Tybal released his Psychoacoustic Environments series, which consisted of 30-minute, uninterrupted environmental sound and synthesized soundscapes. Meanwhile, as an increasingly elaborate studio technology was born during the 1970s, BrianEno, an alumnus of the glam, art rock band Roxy Music, postulated that ambient music was able to accommodate many levels of listening attention without enforcing one in particular. It must be as ignorable as it is interesting. While Eno's late 1970s ambient tape music recordings are not drone music, his acknowledgement of Young, and his own influence on later drone music made him an undeniable link in the chain. Klaus Wiese was a master of the Tibetan singing bowls. He created an extensive series of album releases using them, making impressive acoustic drones.